Hello and welcome to Exchange for Media. With me today is one of the tallest leaders from Indian advertising and marketing industry, and he's made us proud by managing APAC for his company. Please welcome Mr. Ashish Bhasin, CEO APAC, Chairman India Dentsu Aegis Network. Sir, thank you so much for finding time for doing this for us.
My pleasure, Nazia. Good to meet you again. Hope all is well with you.
Thank you, sir. Wish you the same. Sir, as we were just discussing, before this started, that this has been a very difficult year for most of us. The second wave was very deadly in a lot of ways. So, how much has it impacted dentsu here in India and in the entire APAC region? And when I talk of impact, I also talk of the overall sentiment. It's just not business. The 2 months we were all very disturbed emotionally and mentally also. So with all of those things, how did you cope as a company, and what was the impact?
Look, I mean, there is no doubt that the pandemic has impacted not just us, but everybody quite significantly. And if I look at it from the India point of view, I think we were, in general, as a country, relatively unprepared or underprepared for the second wave, particularly. And that has impacted everyone in a big way, because there was a feeling of helplessness. Thankfully, now things seem to be a little better. We're still probably not out of the woods completely, but at least things are a lot better than what they were. But at that time, if you remember, at the peak, it was almost a matter of survival. People were falling ill. Hundreds of people were falling ill all around you. Your near and dear ones of people who you knew, the employees, near and dear ones, they were falling ill. It just felt very helpless, because you didn't have enough oxygen, or you weren't have beds were in shortage, or medicines were in shortage, and you didn't know what to do. And I think that was a terrible, terrible phase for a period of about 4 to 6 weeks. Thereafter, as the peak passed and it started slowing, cases started coming down. I think some semblance of stability come in, and today, of course, we're in a lot better position, and much better position, and with vaccination also taking up, I'm hopeful that we should not have this, but it's significantly impacted. As far as business is concerned, I'm just now answering from an India point of view. I'll tell you about the region in a while. As far as business is concerned, actually, it was, I would say, a little less impact than I'd feared the worst, but it was a little less impact. And I think there were a few reasons for it. One is that IPL was on till about the third week of April. April it had started weakening towards the second half, but at least it wasn't that bad. May was not great as expected, because, one by one markets were going into lockdown. So some clients, their dealerships were closed, etc. But not as severe as it was in the first wave, which was a much longer and a much more total kind of a lockdown. Now the opening up has started, and I think gradually things will get better. And I always say this gradually. I'm not a believer of that. One day there'll be a switch and there'll be whatever this V-shaped recovery and everything will be fine and so on. But I think generally the direction is right. Things are starting to improve. And I think every week, every month, hopefully will be better than the previous month. We are also in the midst of monsoons. And so far the news on monsoons is good. We always underestimate the impact of monsoons on the Indian economy. Still a large part of our economy, if not agrarian, is dependent upon agrarian. Even industry is dependent upon rural demand in many ways, right? Because you have saturation, near saturation in many categories in urban areas. So the signs on monsoons look good. And my own sense is that if we have a good monsoon, and if we don't have a third wave or a fourth wave or whatever, and if vaccination goes well, then by the time we get to the festive season, we should be out of the woods, and things should be back to normal. But it'll be a gradual climb back and not a switch on and off kind of a scenario. As far as rest of the region is concerned, different countries are in different states. So some, like China, went in first, got out after that, and then didn't really get that impacted by the second wave, etc. Others, like Taiwan, is a great example. They have a very big operation. Almost 1 year, it was hardly impacted. People were working from office on most times. There were no lockdowns, etc. And they didn't really have even the first wave. Forget about the second wave. But off late, a few weeks ago, even Taiwan has started getting impacted. Vietnam is another such market. So I think different markets are in different states, but by and large, people are the economy-wise less impacted this time because I think there is hope that at least the vaccine is there and the vaccination process is on and people have learned to cope better with it. Some like Australia, for example, the number of cases are pretty low, but still off and on Melbourne keeps going into lockdowns, etc. We've got to learn to live with a little bit of a yo-yo kind of a on-off waves type of a world until things fully settle down and until vaccination globally comes to a certain level. So I would say it's a mixed bag.
2020 was clearly a very bad year for most of the agencies. So even dentsu, when your results came in, they weren't that good. Most of the figures were in negative. And there was this announcement that you are the organization will restructure a lot of things. There would be some 4 operating pillars and 6 global agency brands. There were talks of consolidations. If you can tell us more about it and how did it happen in India?
Look, 2020 was not a great year for anyone, including for us. Obviously, business was lower in 2020 than it was in 2019, and it did have its impact. However, what we did do as a company was that we underwent a transformation program that did involve restructuring, and we had landed up into a scenario where we had almost 160 brands globally. Now, that's not a sustainable scenario in that sense, there are opportunities to drive efficiencies. I'm a big believer of one P&L, one dentsu, right? Ultimately, what does a client want? They want that you should be able to address all their marketing communication services needs, right, in as simple a manner as possible, in the fastest, most efficient, most productive way. And if we can give that all in under one umbrella, where I think dentsu has a significant advantage over any of our competitors, both globally and more so in India, because by nature we are integrated. If you can do that, I think that's the best position to be in. And if you're in that position, you don't need 160 brands. You do need some brands, and we've decided that those are going to be 6 global brands, and there will be some local brands also in that. But so that was one of the areas of transformation. So just like how we advise our clients, for digital transformation or for transforming their organizations, I think it's most important that agencies also look inwards and transform themselves so that you're future ready. And I think that's the exercise which we announced and embarked upon. And bulk of it, I think, is in most of the parts of the world is already done, and it is underway, and it's progressing very well at the moment.
And in India?
Well, in India also, we are in the process of consolidation, restructuring, etc. So for one, we now have 3 service lines, 3 clear service lines. There's creative, media, and there's CXM, so that wherever possible, we're able to combine the researches, combine the resources, etc., avoid duplication where you need to be, and to give a more holistic solution to the client. We've already announced, for example, the media service line leadership. We've announced there's going to be a CEO to look at our operations, which is Kartika here in the case of India, with Divya in the case of media. Likewise, there'll be a creative service line lead, there'll be a CXM service line lead, and so on and so forth. So the whole new way of working, which global has adopted, India's, I would say, pretty much on par or almost at the forefront of it, because we're very much a part of the global drive on that. So definitely in India also that's progressing well.
So there were also talks of, cost savings, which was also announced officially that the entire group is aiming to achieve. There was a number, it was given in yens, that we are going to permanently lower our cost base. And did this also include, reducing your headcounts and
I think it's given in that report and it is announced. It relooked at number of legal entities, number of brands, rationalizing.
They said they're going to cut 6,000 staff, but
I don't know what the number is globally, frankly. I won't know that. But there was like you rightly said, there was a restructuring program that was announced and that was carried out, and in some places was still in process. But it was a transformation program. So while there would be some areas maybe where staff was extra, but there were other areas, particularly in the transformation areas, where you needed to hire a lot more people. So we underwent a significant transformation program and now are coming out of that much stronger, I would think, where we are. And the best sign of that is that after a long time, we're now showing growth. So that to me is the best the only test in the market is that are you growing? And it's happy to see that at least so far. I mean, today we are in that scenario. You cannot predict what's going to happen even 2 months, 3 months later because of the COVID circumstances. But so far, things are looking much, much better and growth is back, which I think is a good sign for the industry and good sign for dentsu as well.
And where is that bulk of growth coming from?
I think more so.
Is it from cost savings and the transformation and other things,
never,
or it is also coming from the new business? Or
growth never comes from cost saving.
Okay.
You may be able to improve your margins by cost saving. Growth comes by getting more business. That business may either be organic or inorganic or whatever. You may be able to have better extraction from that business, etc. But my focus always is to grow the business. We were hit by a pandemic. It was a once in a 100-year kind of a scenario. It dropped down the overall revenues that the businesses had in most markets. In fact, I would say in almost all markets, it dropped the revenues down. Obviously, the cost base has to be adjusted to the new revenue level, the drop revenue level. But you're never going to be able to grow back by cutting the costs. You have to get your costs in line with the new revenue. There's no doubt about that. And that's a very important exercise to take. But in my view, if you have to go out of that, get out back to where it was, you've got to grow. So when I say growth, I mean business growth, revenue growth. That's not going to come ever from cost cutting in that sense. So my focus is that what are the other services you can provide to a client? Can we give a more integrated offering to a client and therefore charge a premium for that offering? Or are there any parts of the offering which currently the client might be using me for, let's say, only creative? Can I also offer media services to them? We are, for example, leaders in digital, in CXM and tech and all of that. And every client needs that. Can we also offer those services to them? So that's where growth comes in. And I think that's where our growth is coming in from, at least.
You handle the entire APAC region. You have already touched on that, but I would want to understand in detail which of the markets have been most resilient. And if you have to measure India on that resilience scale, where do we stand, and which market can we take inspiration from, which has similar kind of situations? And
in terms of resilience, I would say markets like Taiwan, markets like Vietnam were relatively least impacted by COVID. Even Singapore to an extent, they managed their COVID situation, the number of cases or the amount of disruption better than most other markets did. So I think they stood out. But then, like I said, some of them are now having almost like their first wave. Forget about the second wave. In terms of the market that actually got hit the most and earliest was China. If you remember this, we have an office in Wuhan, which is quite a large office, big offices in Shanghai, in Beijing, and so on and so forth. And even before the Chinese New Year last year, somewhere around February, things were already coming to a grinding halt and the number of cases. So they were hit first, even before the rest of the world hadn't yet realized, even we in India hadn't yet realized the scale and enormity of it. So, but while they were hit first, they also actually bounced back much earlier than others. And I think that's a good example. So if you look at the GDP of China for the first 3 or 4 months of this calendar year, it's actually grown by mid-teens. I think 17, 18% or something like that is the figure. So what a tremendous, they were hit last year and the growth has already started coming. And I think that's what India as a country should also aim for. There is no doubt that our economy got hit last year, and therefore every aspect of the economy got hit. But I think as things improve, as vaccinations improve, as the health situation improves, our focus now has to be that how does the economy quickly bounce back and growth starts coming in. And like I said, I feel that process will be gradual, and I feel it's around the festive season that you'll see it coming from our industry perspective, that you will see it coming, more to itself.
So this feeling of despair that a lot of Indians have experienced in the last 2 months, and still that consumer sentiment, all those things that people talk about, it has somewhere been hurt. Do you think this will also impact festive season in the long run, or by then most of the people would have come out of it?
Look, I hope it doesn't impact for 2-3 reasons. One is we're a very resilient nation. Indians, we can take a lot, we can absorb a lot and then get on with it. Maybe it's a part of our feeling of karma or 5,000 years of culture or what. I don't know the reason. I'm not the expert on that, but we're quite resilient as a nation. When hardships come, we all come together, then we get out of it and we, move forward on that. So I do feel that we will get there because look, everything, there are a lot of things which are in our favor. We have a large young population which is moving very fast. Our economy, even in the worst case scenario, if you listen to the most negative of the projections, different people are giving, it's still showing a high single digit growth. At least some are saying double digit, but most of the estimates are coming of the economy between 8 to 12% or so. So I don't know where it'll finally land, but if you're going to grow at 8, 10% in that, then growth is going to come back. We have, I'm very optimistic about India for medium term or long term. Look, there are 1.3, 1.4 billion of us. We have a huge market within ourselves with huge cost advantages. We have an amazing talent pool. When I was in school now, many, many years ago, we were always taught that population is our biggest problem. It was one of the biggest problems, and that time you had population control measures were being announced and hum do, hamare do, and mass sterilization and this and that. Today, the world has turned on its head. Our biggest asset is our man force, our people, our human force, right? So, and that's what is giving us a domestic market to capture. There are industries, look at the number of IT related startups that are relatively new. When I say relatively new, last 2, 3, 4 years, who are today commanding unicorn plus valuations, right? So we have the brain power, we have the management capability. There are 60 large global companies over $1 billion, which are run by Indians globally, right? So we've got a very bright workforce. We have very intelligent people. We've got a natural advantage in some industries, at least like IT. And I would hope even advertising one day, because we've got very, very good talent in that area. So we've got a lot going for us. We're also, age is on our side. We're relatively a younger population than the others. So I see no reason why in the medium term or in the long run, our growth will not be good. Equally, as a nation, we can shoot ourselves in the foot also. So unless we have some political upheavals or communal upheavals or things that are, unpredictable at this point in time, I'm quite optimistic that the next 10 years, India will do very, very well. And there are a lot of indicators to that. You look at electricity consumption, the way it's been going up. You look at various, surrogate factors. When you study the macroeconomy, you can see that we are poised for a good 10 years, I feel.
Ashish, sir, coming back to advertising and marketing industry, correct me if I'm wrong. There was last 2020, in 2020, a lot of pitches were postponed, because there was so much uncertainty. Many brands did not want to go for a new agency, or they did not, they weren't sure that, if this is the right time to call the pitch. And is it true? That's what I've learned. A lot of pitches were held back last year. So if pitches won't happen, globally, then how do you add new businesses?
Are you talking about globally or in India?
Globally, they eventually started, but in India, particularly, a lot of
at the moment, if I look at Asia Pacific, at the moment, I think it's the busiest pitch season I've ever seen in the last maybe 10 years. I can tell you.
This you mean a few months? I'm talking of 2020. 2020,
2020, obviously in the middle of a pandemic, pitching was still happening, but obviously it was subdued, right? Because the whole world was in the throes of a pandemic. So the chances of that were, but if you look at now, let's say last 3-4 months, which is the best measure that you get, the most latest measure. Some of the largest FMCGs companies globally are under pitch. Some of the big, consumer companies are under pitch. Some of the software companies are under pitch. So it's just some of the biggest pitches. If you total it up, that number will run into hundreds of billions of dollars on that. And every agency group will tell you, because globally it's the same few agencies that that largely participate in these. And I'm not only talking about media, I'm also talking about creative. They'll all tell you that, it's almost like you don't have bandwidth to pitch kind of a scenario. So there's a pitch palooza, I would say, which is on as we speak. Some have already happened, some are happening, some are about to happen, etc. So it's from a pitching point of view, it's probably the busiest season in a long time, or a busiest 3-4 months that the industry has seen in a long time.
It's good news for the industry.
Well, E4M always knows all the pitches before they happen. So you should know it before I do.
No, I mean, I maybe the last year was like so slow that I stopped keeping track of them. So, I mean, I knew about L'Oreal and we had reported some of them, which just finished.
I'm not taking any specific name.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that
So,
globally there are lots of pitches in play, and some are local pitches, some are regional pitches, and many are global pitches. Some are in the creative only area, some are in the media only area, some are combined pitches. So there's a lot of activity going on.
in every adversity lies an opportunity. So, what, according to you, will be the biggest opportunity for advertisers in media in this post-pandemic world?
I think the biggest opportunity is that we've probably lived through the worst, and therefore, there's always some amount of fat and wastage in any system that builds up over a period of time. Take one example of travel. All of us were traveling 15, 20 days a month. We thought that there was no other way of working other than getting onto a flight to go for a 2-hour meeting and to, spend a night in a hotel and then come back the next day with all. And we thought that was the only way life would work. I had never worked from home before this had happened ever in my life. Never, not even one day, right? On that. Now we've realized that 80-90%, yes, there are some things that you still need everybody to come together, but 80-90% of the work can happen pretty efficiently on video calls like we're doing one, or through other means of communication. And therefore, it may not be that necessary to some business travel may still be necessary, but it may not be necessary to the extent that we were taking on earlier. Office space, for example, most companies, at least the larger companies, will give flexibility for quite some time to come to their staff, right? People are reluctant. They've also got used to a certain type of a lifestyle. So the back to work is going to be a process. It's again not going to be a switch that one fine morning you say, okay, now back to 9 to 6, and every 100% people come in and log in at 9 o'clock, sign the muster and so on. It's not going to happen. So office space, real estate space, how do you, so there is a huge amount of, I wouldn't say wastage, but I would say efficiencies that have come into the system, and that money that you have saved can be put into transformational areas. For example, e-commerce, for example, digital. In all of this, and this is luckily the reason, particularly in India, where we were relatively less impacted and actually have done quite well in this period, is because all this while we were saying digital is where you've got to be, digital is where you've got to be ahead. And the one part of the business which was least impacted, of course, everything was impacted, but which was least impacted was actually digital. And being digitally ahead is helping us in a time like this. So some of those monies that you were spending on airfare or hotels or whatever can now be put into hiring better talent, can be put into, digitally transforming yourselves if you haven't already done it, etc., etc. And I think that's a big plus. The other bit I think is that after this pandemic, geography is history. It doesn't matter whether you're sitting in Muzaffarnagar or Mumbai. If there is good talent which is available, or Melbourne, if there is good talent which is available, you should now be able to attract them from anywhere, because if you're going to be working virtually or you have the option of working flexibly, then where you're located matters much lesser. I wouldn't say it doesn't matter. In some instances, it will matter, but it matters lesser and lesser. So it opens up a complete new talent pool, catchment area, which I think is very, very important for us, because the single biggest problem that faces our industry, and not just in India, everywhere, I think, is people. Because as an industry, we've been experts in poaching from one another. If somebody is there, I pay 110, I get it. Somebody else pays 120, he takes. So playing musical chairs with the same talent, we've concentrated much less in growing the pool of talent that is available to us. And the fact is, if I look 33 years ago when I joined advertising to today, advertising agencies used to be day one companies in IIM Ahmedabad, right? After a period of time, we weren't even able to be day 5 company, and therefore we stopped going to IIMs. Then we started going to second rung MBA schools. Then we started going to only maybe good colleges and not, and slowly.
Why was that, sir?
Because there were so many hundreds of other options that came up as liberalization happened, as more industries came in, which were much better paying. The remuneration in advertising was no way a match for a McKinsey or a Citibank in those days, or etc. So you couldn't keep pace with that. When we joined advertising, for example, somebody came out from IIM, one person went to Lintas, one person went to Levers. Same batch, same everything. There were 10 years later, the situation was very different. 30 years later, it is completely different, right? So I feel the quality of talent going out from the industry is better than the quality of talent coming in. So one of the biggest challenges and opportunities, therefore, for us is to get in great talent and to make sure that the talent we have is properly uh, looked after, retained, incentivized, is bright enough. And I feel this flexibility in working, future way of working, etc., will be steps in that direction, and we can at least use it for some correction in that side. And collectively, as an industry, we've got to grow the talent pool in advertising as an industry rather than only concentrate in poaching from one another.
So, before we conclude, I mean, I would just want to understand that were there some kind of initiatives that dentsu as a company took for employees who were suffering from COVID, or or their families? So it is more about because this is resilience story. What were the things that we as a society did for each other? If you can share some examples.
I was completely overwhelmed by the kind of response that, forget us as a company, as individual employees were giving in that. First of all, our global company, I mean, globally for India, specifically for India, when we were in this thing, our global company ran a voluntary donation campaign through, through an NGO in Britain to get oxygen concentrators. If you remember, at that time, oxygen was the biggest problem.
Yeah.
Not only did the company donate a lot of money, but individuals donated a lot of money to help India, not their colleagues in India, but to help India. And I think that was brilliant when you have, 50, 60,000 people sort of helping in that. You really feel good and you feel a part of that on that way. In India, I think Anand and his team really, really did well. So there were three kinds of efforts, right? One is a very organized, structured kind of a practical effort. So, for example, insurance covers to be increased in case somebody has a sad, unfortunate instance of somebody passing away. Make sure that the insurance or through other ways you're covering a few years of salary to that person, to the family is less hit, right? Then there were practical issues. So we, for example, tied up with several hotel chains. People don't have place to quarantine. It's easy because not everybody is staying in very large homes where you can take a separate home, separate bathroom, etc. Or if you're fearful somebody in your family has got it, how do you prevent from, what do you do, etc. Many of our staff stay as paying guests or shared accommodation, etc. on that. So we tied up with hotel chains that are I mean, as a corporate deal or whatever. So in case somebody has a problem, you could do that. Various, I mean, oxygen, which was a big focus. So we have a division called Indeed, which is our CSR division, work with government authorities in Haryana, which is for Gurgaon, and several state governments, Maharashtra government, etc., to see, work with some of our clients to see how that could be fulfilled. We had a doctor on call, wellness programs, and it's a continuing effort on that. But to me, the most heartening thing was that individuals, leaders in different team leaders in different locations, because everybody was as helpless as anyone else, they took it upon themselves. मेरी टीम के इस बंदे के मदर को ये मेडिसिन चाहिए, immediately पूरे everywhere, the news is spread in that network and everybody's running here and there to try to arrange that, because it was a survival issue in that stage. Nobody is bothering about who's paying, where's the money coming from. And I think that spirit to me was like a silver lining in a otherwise very dark cloud. And while 100 activities were going on, particularly touched by the world doing this for India and for Indian individuals doing it, for their colleagues and their colleagues' relatives and so on. And I think to me, that shows that makes me so proud, of India as my country, dentsu as my company, and all the people in it. So to me, I think that was one good thing.
Sir, thank you so much for talking to us. It's always pleasure to have any conversation with you, and it's so much to learn from you. So thank you again, and we wish you all the best.
Stay safe.
Thank you.